welcome. You're watching India Today Explains. I'm Akshita Nandagopal. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll break down all of the week's biggest stories. And here's a look at what's coming your way. Our top story is the heated debate triggered by the Supreme Court on stray dogs. But what does the law currently say? And how do other countries deal with the stray dog menace? We'll tell you all about that. Also on the show, the Trump-Putin meeting and how Trump has had a complete flip-flop on Russia, his love-hate relationship with Putin. We also focus on the new income tax bill and tell you all about it. The E20 blended fuel, what is it? What is with the outrage? We'll tell you all about that as well. And finally, my colleague Sandeep joins me on this broadcast to tell you about how the Uttarakhand rescue operations are taking place and how authorities are finding bodies buried under the rubble. The Supreme Court, in a landmark verdict, has ordered that stray dogs in Delhi NCR will be moved to shelters and not be released back to the streets or public places. A bench of Justices Pardiwala and Mahadevan ruled that the Delhi government must ensure dog shelters are created that can house about 5,000 dogs. Sterilization and immunization of the dogs must take place in these shelters. But what are the current laws on stray dogs and how do other countries ensure there are no strays on the streets? Let's begin by telling you about the current legislation, which interestingly is completely contradictory to what the Supreme Court has ruled now. The Animal Birth Control Dog Rules of 2001, enacted under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, states that sterilization and vaccination are the only legal means of stabilizing or reducing stray dog populations and eliminating the risk of rabies. It's important to highlight here that as per this law, relocation of stray dogs is strictly prohibited. Under the Stray Dog Management Rules of 2001, it's also illegal for an individual, an RWA, which is a Residents Welfare Association, or an estate management to remove or relocate dogs. Dogs have to be sterilized and vaccinated and then returned to the same area. They cannot be removed by the municipality either. That changes, of course, now with the Supreme Court deciding that the dogs will be removed from their localities and moved to shelters, and the onus will be on the state to ensure adequate resources. But what do other countries really do to address the stray dog menace? Countries across the world have dealt with stray dog populations using a mix of legislation, of public education, sterilization, and also community engagement. India also perhaps can draw valuable lessons from successful models that balance animal welfare, public health, and importantly, human-animal coexistence. Turkey, for example, which also had a stray dog problem, enacted a law in July 2024 to remove approximately 4 million stray dogs. Under this legislation, local authorities must capture the dogs, vaccinate them against diseases, sterilize them, then place them up for adoption. The law also authorizes euthanasia for dogs that are sick, aggressive, terminally ill, or pose a health risk for that matter to humans, so those with rabies too. In the Netherlands, organizations have worked over the years to eradicate stray dogs through what's referred to as a CNVR program: catch, neuter, vaccinate, return. Organized vaccination and sterilization reduce the number of strays on the streets. So if a stray dog is spotted, it's removed and sheltered until adoption, and all these steps have been taken up. This is what ensured that Netherlands became the first country in the world to achieve a stray dog-free status. The Supreme Court order for Delhi, for the National Capital Region, has sparked off a huge debate on how India needs to also address the stray dog menace. The relationship between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin is anything but straightforward. Trump has faced criticism for appearing overly lenient toward Russia, a country often seen as a long-time US adversary, while simultaneously claiming to be the toughest American president on Russian policy. Over the years, his stance on Russia has swung between admiration and confrontation, making the Trump-Putin dynamic one of the most unpredictable in recent political history. So now the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska comes amid the US president actively pushing for a peace deal in the Russia-Ukraine war. But what does the history of Trump and Putin's relationship actually look like, and what have the two said about each other? Let's go back to Trump's first term as president, when his relationship with Putin drew intense scrutiny both in America at home and abroad. Trump praised Putin on several occasions, calling him a strong leader, expressing a desire for better relations between the two nations.
I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful.
But this period was overshadowed by widespread allegations that Russia had meddled in the 2016 US presidential election to boost Trump's chances. US intelligence agencies concluded that Moscow launched cyber attacks, spread disinformation, and attempted to influence public opinion in favor of Trump. This led to multiple investigations, including the high-profile Mueller probe, which examined possible coordination between Trump's campaign and Russian operatives. Now, despite the mounting evidence, Trump repeatedly dismissed these claims as politically motivated and resisted criticizing Putin directly, fueling further controversy and raising questions about the true nature of the relationship.
There was no collusion with the campaign. And every time you hear all of these, 12 and 14, it's stuff that has nothing to do. And frankly, they admit these are not people involved in the campaign. But to the average reader out there, they're saying, well, maybe that does. It doesn't. And even the people involved, some perhaps told misstories, although in one case the FBI said there was no lie. There was no lie. Somebody else said there was. We ran a brilliant campaign, and that's why I'm president.
We should not proceed from the immediate political interests that guide certain political powers in our country. We should be guided by facts. Could you name a single fact that would definitely prove the collusion? This is utter nonsense.
So importantly, in the days before Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, when thousands of Russian troops were waiting at the border, Donald Trump could not have been clearer. Vladimir Putin was displaying signs of genius. That's what he said. And that indulgent mood persisted for a long time.
I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right.
After that came in Trump's second term as president. On Inauguration Day, Trump told reporters that Putin should sign a deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war.
He should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal. I think Russia's going to be in big trouble. You take a look at their economy, you take a look at the inflation in Russia.
In the early weeks of the second Trump presidency, Moscow and Washington appeared well on track to reboot their bilateral relations. In a telephone call in February, soon after Donald Trump returned to the White House, the two presidents talked about visiting each other's countries. It felt like a Putin-Trump summit could happen any day. Later that month, in a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky, Trump reversed course, who's to blame for the Russia-Ukraine war, by suggesting that Ukraine is responsible for Russia's invasion of its country.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it.
Now, Trump's growing frustration with Kremlin currently stems from the fact that Vladimir Putin has been reluctant to stop the fighting. In recent weeks, he's condemned Russia's relentless attacks on Ukrainian cities, calling it disgusting, calling it disgraceful. He's accused President Putin of talking a lot of bullshit, to quote Trump, on Ukraine.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all. He's killing people, and something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
Now, Donald Trump sees himself as a great deal maker. And from the look of things, he hasn't given up trying to secure one with Vladimir Putin. And the jury is still out on whether he will be able to. A new version of the Income Tax Bill 2025 was presented in Parliament on August 11th, just 3 days after the earlier draft was formally withdrawn on August 8th. Formally titled the Income Tax No. 2 Bill of 2025, it aims to consolidate, to update India's income tax laws and replace the 6-decade-old Income Tax Act of 1961. This legislation marks a milestone in India's economic history, with the new law proposed to take effect from April 1st, 2026. Important to highlight that. Now, piloting the bill in Parliament, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said it did not impose any new tax rate and only simplified the language which is required for understanding the complex income tax laws.
Madam, with your permission, I rise to move for leave to introduce a bill further to amend the Income Tax Act 1961 and to amend the Finance Act 2025.
प्रश्न यह है कि विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करने की अनुमति प्रदान की जाए। जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में है वो हाँ कहें, जो सदस्य इसके विरोध में है वे ना कहें। मेरे विचार में निर्णय हाँ वालों के पक्ष में हुआ, हाँ वालों के पक्ष में हुआ। माननीय मंत्री जी विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करें।
Ma'am, I introduce the bill.
But why was the earlier bill withdrawn? It was first introduced in the House in February. It was immediately referred to the Parliamentary Select Committee for its perusal. The 31-member committee, chaired by BJP MP Baijan Panda, submitted its report on July 21st after examining the provisions in detail. It focused on simplifying the language, removing redundancies, and also improving procedural clarity. The revised bill now includes most of the 285 recommendations from the panel, covering drafting refinements such as phrase alignment, consequential amendments, and corrections in cross-references. But what's changing? Well, essentially, one of the biggest changes is that the bulky structure of the existing tax law has been streamlined. The new bill removes redundant provisions and archaic language as well. So the legislation is not a set of amendments but a completely fresh statute, cutting the number of sections from 819 all the way down to 536, chapters down from 47 to 23. It consolidates overlapping provisions, removes outdated clauses, and has rewritten the text in plain, direct language. Many would argue that's the need of the hour. One of the most notable changes is the scrapping of the assessment year concept, which is replaced instead by a tax year, directly linked to the year in which income is earned, eliminating a long-standing source of confusion among taxpayers.
This amendment and bringing in a new law in the place of old 1961 aims at simplifying the language, the lucidity which is required for anyone to understand it, no anomalies or any overlapping language that leads to misinterpretations. So this aims at only that. There are no new rates being brought in here, no tax issues which are being brought in here. That will come every year as it does in the finance bill. This is purely for making the document simpler.
Now, several provisions have also been introduced or clarified to reduce disputes and improve fairness. Taxpayers who file returns after the due date will now be eligible for refunds in genuine cases of delay. Illness, technical issues are some of those issues that are identified. But what remains the same? Well, the bill doesn't change the current tax rates or other major provisions. It retains the same income tax slabs that were announced in the previous budget. Timelines for filing returns, paying taxes, and other compliance-related requirements also remain unchanged. So the new income tax bill is expected to provide a clearer tax framework while keeping the fundamental tax structure unchanged, simplifying the language, restructuring provisions, and so the government aims to make tax compliance easier for individuals and businesses. There's a raging debate currently on blended fuel in India, ethanol blended with petrol. While India is looking to launch E20, essentially 20% blended fuel, there have been questions raised over the mileage and some other issues by users. Let's tell you all about this type of fuel, the pros and cons as well. First of all, what is E20 fuel? Well, E20 fuel is a type of gasoline blended with 20% ethanol and 80% petrol. Ethanol is an alcohol-based fuel made from sugarcane, corn or other plant materials. So it's renewable, biodegradable and burns cleaner than petrol. Essentially, this is clean energy. And that's the biggest plus of E20 fuel, lower emissions. It supports farmers since it's made from crops like sugarcane. It reduces dependence also on imported oil, which is a big tick and a plus for India. But mind you, not all vehicles are E20 compatible. Using it in non-compatible engines can cause corrosion, damage rubber parts and also reduce mileage. So here's where we talk about India. E20 fuel was launched in India on February 6, 2023 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The rollout was part of the government's ethanol blending program to reduce fossil fuel dependency and carbon emissions. The E20 transition is part of India's climate commitment to reduce oil imports and to cut down on emissions. As of this year, 2025, E20 fuel is available in over 7,000 petrol stations across India, particularly in urban pockets, major cities, in highways as well. And the government is aiming for nationwide E20 availability by 2026. Newer models of cars and two-wheelers like Maruti Suzuki, Honda, TVS, Hero, Tata, Hyundai, they're all being designed to be E20 compliant. But here's why there's a raging debate over this kind of blended fuel. Many vehicle owners have claimed their mileage has dropped substantially after switching to E20. For instance, some of the examples being shared on social media, one Volkswagen Vento mileage plummeted from 10 kilometers per litre to just 6.3 kilometers per litre. Many compared their Hyundai fuel efficiency to a Mercedes, and no, that's not a compliment in this case. But the government has refuted these claims. Listen in to Nitin Gadkari.
20% इथेनॉल डालने के ऊपर देश में एक तो भी गाड़ी में तकरार रही कि आप नाम बताइए। अभी सीएम ने स्टेटमेंट निकाला है, सबने ऑलरेडी एआरआई ने निकाला हुआ है। इथेनॉल के कारण कोई गाड़ी में कोई तकलीफ हुई ऐसा एक भी उदाहरण नहीं है। और दूसरी बात, क्या ये देश का इंपोर्ट 22 लाख करोड़ का जो इकोनॉमी से पैसा जा रहा है वो कम नहीं होना चाहिए? क्या दिल्ली में ये प्रदूषण से आप सब लोग जिस प्रकार का सामना कर रही है प्रदूषण कम नहीं होना चाहिए? अब ये कुछ ना कुछ इसको विरोध करने में किसी का इंटरेस्ट हो सकते हैं, पर उसकी चिंता मत करिए।
So the government maintaining that the drop in fuel economy is minor, 1 to 2% in compatible vehicles, up to 3 to 6% in older ones. The government has also backed the move, reiterating how it helps farmers. From 2014 to 2015 to July 2025, ethanol blending by public sector oil firms saved 1.44 lakh crore rupees in foreign exchange, substituted 245 lakh metric tons of crude and cut CO2 emissions equal to planting 30 crore trees. At 20% blending, farmer payments this year alone could reach 40,000 crores and forex savings of 43,000 crores. The government has also highlighted how a country like Brazil has successfully run on E27, so 27% blended fuel for years, and that India's vehicle technology, service networks and supply chains have been prepared for the E20 shift since 2021. After that massive tragedy in Dharali of Uttarakhand, rescue operations continue to find bodies that are buried deep under the rubble. But if you have ever wondered what exactly authorities use to be able to find out which are the places where bodies are, where people could be buried, I'm handing it over to Sandeep Unitan to explain that the equipment that's available to rescue officials in India.
Himachal Pradesh has been hit by flash floods since June 2025. Property worth lakhs of crores have been destroyed, tens of thousands of people displaced, and over 240 people have been killed. Now, the silver lining to all of this dark clouds are the use of technology in rescuing people. And that's where drones have been used extensively to rescue people, to locate them, to move ahead of rescue columns, to identify safe areas for them to move in, to provide rescue. And this is where these civilian drones, commercial off-the-shelf drones, which have a flying time of something like 60 minutes, have been used extensively, as they have in the past. But the drones that have been used here for the first time possibly are military drones, which are the LDHAs, or the logistic drones for high altitude. Now, these drones are used by the military to resupply their positions at high altitudes, especially in the mountainous regions facing China. Now, they're extremely useful in a mountainous state like Himachal Pradesh to locate civilians, to render assistance to them, bring supplies to them, and because they carry such a large cargo, they can bring something like 40 kgs of medicines, relief supplies, fuel, clothing, blankets, all of that. And these fly ahead of rescue columns manned by the army, and they've been extremely useful to get aid to where it is needed. Now, the other big important item of technology, of course, has been the life detectors. Now, these life detectors are extremely sensitive electronic equipment. They are used to detect for signs of life under crash structures, rubble, concrete, collapsed buildings, mudslides, all of that. They use acoustic sensors, they use seismic sensors to detect for signs of life. They can detect something like a heartbeat behind something like 40 meters of crash structures. They're extremely useful for detecting life in areas like this, which are hit by flash floods or collapsed structures, debris, and all of that. These have been used. And of course, when all of this fails, you always have dogs as a backup. Man's best friend, of course, dogs have been used as well. They've proved invaluable in locating people in distress, especially if they are under collapsed structures, under mudslides, under rock slides, simply because they have such a good sense of smell. Now, humans, for instance, have 6 million olfactory receptors in their nose. Dogs, like this Labrador here, have something like 100 million olfactory receptors in their nose. This is what makes them extremely invaluable for detecting life. They're able to spot humans, direct rescue efforts in particular regions where people could be trapped under structures and pulled out even several days after they've been there. So this is essentially the template of what we've seen here in Himachal Pradesh, that combination of technology and of course dog power to rescue people in distress.
That's all we have time for in this edition of India Today Explains. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'll see you same time next week.